Okay, so here's a quick video to wrap it all up. So PC1 wants to send a packet of data to server 1. It starts off by comparing its IP address and its subnet mask to the IP address and subnet mask of server 1. So once it does that, PC concludes that the destination of this IP address is not in its neighborhood. It's not in its LAN. It's in a different neighborhood. Okay? So because it now knows that it's in a remote network or a remote subnet, it's going to determine that it needs to send its packet to its default gateway. This router would be its default gateway because at some point before all this is happening, this PC1 was configured to router 1 so that it could see this as its default gateway. And there's two ways of doing that. You can do it manually, or you can do it through dynamically learned via Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, DHCP. So now that the default PC1 has a default gateway, and this is it right here, this router, is now going to need the MAC address of this router, and at that point PC1 sends an ARP request to get the MAC address of this router, and then it waits. And at some point, the router then sends a request back to PC1, a reply back, an ARP reply back to PC1, in which case PC1 stores the router 1's MAC address in its ARP cache. So the ARP cache is a lot like the switch's MAC address table, except in PCs they have an ARP cache. And there we go. Now that it's here, router 1 receives the frame and receives the frame, and then it kind of interrogates the frame. It's looking for the time to live field, and it actually kind of decrements it a little bit. It kind of deteriorates it a little bit. So there's only so many routers of a frame or some data can go through before the time of live expires, before it's no good anymore and gets discarded. So this is its first router, so it still it's still, good to go. So it uses this serial, which I want to say is a cable, but it uses this serial interface to get to the next router. Now, if the packet or the frame that's time to live has expired, basically time to live equals 0, then an Internet Control Message Protocol, ICMP, is going to send this message back to PC1 saying that time is exceeded. But anyway, in our scenario, this is its first stop, so it's good to go. Assuming that the time to live is not 0, router 1 checks its routing table to determine the best path to reach this network here and this neighborhood over here, right? Well, it would be nice if this neighborhood had connection. There we go. All right, here's something important to note, that serial interfaces do not have MAC addresses. Therefore, router 1 cannot send a ARP request, or is not required for interfaces because, again, they don't have MAC addresses. So therefore, router 1 just sends or forwards the frame out of this serial 1 interface, and it sends it to router 2. Now when router 2 here receives the frame, it again, because this is another router, because this is another router, it again decrements the time to live in the IP header, just like router 1 did. Router 2 is going to also look at the frame, and the frame is going to decrement a little bit, deteriorate a little bit. But again, it's only been 2 routers, so it's still good to go. It should not the time to live should not equal 0. Now, assuming that the time to live does not equal 0, router 2 interrogates the IP head and determines the destination network. In this case, the destination network is going to be, the server. And so it basically does the same thing similar that PC1 did over here when it sent an ARP request to the router. Router 2 is going to send an ARP request to server 1, in which case it waits for server 1 to reply back so that it can the router 2 can have server 1's MAC address. And then again, after ARP reply is received from server 1, router 2 forwards the frame out to server 1.